An Irish Rebel, Chapter 1. Part 3. They witnessed acts of unexpected kindness, a shared crust of bread, a comforting hand on a feverish brow, alongside moments of sharp cruelty, a desperate fight over a few extra rations, a callous disregard for the suffering of others. The confined space amplified both the best and worst of human nature. But for John and Peter, their mutual reliance became their shield. But this shield was starting to chafe. John found himself growing resentful of Peter's unwavering optimism, a naive, bright spark that seemed to mock his own gnawing fear. Was Peter truly so untroubled, or was he just better at hiding it? John's instinct, honed by years of hardship, screamed caution, a deep-seated distrust that warred with the desperate need for companionship. He'd seen Peter, just that morning, hoard a portion of his meager water, a fleeting, selfish act that sent a cold ripple through John's gut. He'd said nothing, a decision that felt like a betrayal of his own conscience, a silent pact with Peter's perceived perfection that was starting to suffocate him. Peter, for his part, felt the weight of John's unspoken anxieties pressing down on him. John's grim pronouncements, his constant vigilance, were a drain on Peter's own dwindling reserves of hope. He yearned for a moment of genuine lightness, a shared laugh that wasn't tinged with desperation, but John seemed incapable of offering it. Peter caught himself fantasizing about moments when John's shadow wasn't so long, a cruel thought he immediately pushed away, ashamed. He knew John was afraid, but sometimes Peter's own survival instinct whispered that John's fear was a dangerous contagion, an anchor that might drag them both down. He'd been forced to choose between offering John his last biscuit or keeping it for himself, a moment of agonizing self-preservation that left him with a hollow ache, a guilt that gnawed at him more than any hunger. They were two young men, adrift on a vast ocean, their only anchor the unwavering loyalty they held for one another. But within that anchor, unseen currents of suspicion and self-doubt threatened to tear them apart, leaving them vulnerable to the very despair they fought so hard to evade. The sea serpent was a constant reminder of their vulnerability, but within its depths a bond was being tempered. It was stronger than any chain and more enduring than any hardship. Their shared destiny aboard this vessel was not just a physical journey, but also a profound deepening of their connection. It was a testament to the enduring power of friendship in the face of unimaginable adversity. The sun, a forgotten ember, offered no warmth. Each sunrise melted into the next, a smear of gray across the horizon, punctuated only by the gut-twisting lurch of the ship. The air, thick with brine and the ghost of fish, clung to their lungs, a constant, suffocating kiss. The memory of land, a vibrant burst of color and sound, now felt like a dream whispered by a stranger. Here, only the gnawing void in their bellies and the endless heave of the ocean existed. John's knuckles, white against the splintered mast, flexed. He scanned the deck, his gaze, sharp as a gull's, catching the flicker of fear in the sailor's averted eyes. The slump of shoulders, surrendering to the pervasive ache, he'd coaxed gruff nods for rationed biscuits, bartered tattered cloth for a sliver of precious water, his rough hands constantly busy, stitching, mending, wrestling against the ship's hungry groan. "Another storm brewing, John," a voice rasped, thin as a sail's worn edge. It was Finn, his face a road map of sun-baked wrinkles. John's jaw tightened. He tasted the coming wind on his tongue, felt it tugging at the frayed ropes. "Aye, batten everything down, and keep an eye on Peter." Later, the ship bucked, a wild horse throwing its rider. Peter, a skeletal silhouette against the churning gray, cried out, his frail body convulsing against the unforgiving deck. John was there, his arm a brace against the shuddering wood, his voice a low rumble that cut through the shriek of the wind. "Easy, Peter, easy." He pressed a cracked leather cup to his lips, the brackish water a scant offering against the storm raging within him. The salt spray, a stinging slap, plastered John's hair to his forehead, but his grip remained, a rock in the sea's indifferent fury. Peter, in turn, provided something equally vital, an inextinguishable spark of hope. Even on the darkest days, when the relentless gray sky seemed to press down on the ship, Peter would find something to lift their spirits. He'd mimic the gruff pronouncements of the ship's captain, his impression surprisingly accurate, eliciting weak smiles from John. He'd even manage a pretty convincing, albeit slightly more nasal imitation of the seagull that kept dive-bombing their heads, making John snort with a laugh that was more phlegm than air. Then he'd weave fantastical tales of their future lives in America, describing grand houses with enough rooms to get lost in, and feasts where the turkey was the size of a small pony, all with such vivid detail that, for a fleeting moment, the oppressive reality of the steerage, with its shared smells and shared coughs, would dissipate. His infectious, if sometimes misplaced, optimism was a balm to John's more anxious nature, who was currently convinced a rogue potato was plotting to escape the pantry. "We'll be rich men, Johnny," Peter would declare, his eyes gleaming with a feverish light that rivaled a newly polished penny. "We'll buy our mothers the finest silks and our fathers the strongest whiskey. Enough to make a saint start singing opera, it will." He'd then mime pouring a pint so large it threatened to spill over the imaginary bar. "And they'll be so proud, they'll start telling stories about us down the pub. 'Remember young Peter and Johnny,' they'll say, 'the lads who landed in America with naught but a song and a prayer, and came back with enough gold to buy the whole island back from the English.'" John could only shake his head, a small, genuine smile finally breaking through his worry. It was the kind of impossible dream only Peter could conjure, and for now, that was enough. Their bond had forged itself into something far more potent than friendship, a coiled viper, a shared destiny, a telepathic current that crackled between them, igniting a silent pact stronger than any spoken vow. They were each other's fortress, the ramparts against a brutal world. When a mountain of a man, his breath thick with menace, descended upon Peter, his guttural growl demanding tribute for a meager ration of water, John, a reed against a gale, surged forward. His voice, usually a gentle murmur, erupted, a raw, untamed thing. "Leave him be," he spat, his gaze a burning brand, pinning the brute. The aggressor, perhaps startled by the sudden incandescent ferocity radiating from the wiry Irishman, the unseen anchor of his compatriot's unwavering loyalty, recoiled, a shadow retreating before a flame. But the mountain wasn't so easily deterred. He let out a roar that vibrated through John's bones and lunged, his massive fist a battering ram aimed at John's chest. John, despite his wiry frame, moved with a speed that belied his appearance. He ducked under the clumsy swing, the wind of it whipping past his ear. He scrambled to his feet, a whirlwind of desperate energy. "You want water?" John yelled, his voice cracking. "You'll have to go through me." He didn't have the brute strength to match the stranger, but he had agility and a ferocity born of pure, unadulterated love for Peter. He feinted left, then darted right, a stinging jab connecting with the brute's jaw. It barely registered. The mountain grunted, his eyes narrowing, and swung again, a wild haymaker. This time, John couldn't dodge entirely. The blow caught him on the shoulder, sending a jolt of pain through his arm. He staggered, his vision blurring, but he refused to fall. Peter, wide-eyed and pale, cried out, "John!" That cry was all the fuel John needed. He spat blood onto the parched earth and launched himself at the stranger's legs, a desperate, grappling tackle. The sheer force of the collision sent them both sprawling. John, though pinned beneath the brute's immense weight, managed to twist and bring his knee up, catching the stranger in the ribs. A grunt of pain, a gasp for air. It was a desperate, messy exchange, more primal than skillful, but in those few brutal moments the wiry Irishman stood as a ferocious protector. They shared their last desiccated crusts, their last agonizing sips of tepid, metallic-tasting water, not as a chore, but as a sacred communion, a testament to a love honed in the crucible of childhood, annealed by shared whispered secrets and scraped knees. John, the bedrock, the steadying hand that anchored Peter's tempestuous soul, instinctively corralled his companion's wildfire spirit, his quiet wisdom a shield against the precipice of Peter's impulsive leaps. And Peter, the spark, the incandescent spirit that lured John from the suffocating depths of his own contemplation, would snatch him back from the brink, painting visions of grand horizons against the drab canvas of their gnawing monotony, injecting laughter, sharp and bright, into the suffocating silence. The salt spray stung their cheeks, a constant, stinging kiss from the churning, slate-gray Atlantic. Inside the cramped belly of the sea serpent, the stench of unwashed bodies and stale provisions clung to the damp air like a shroud. Liam, his knuckles white, braced himself against a lurch that sent a cascade of pots clattering across the rough-hewn floor. Across the narrow space, Finn, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion but burning with a fierce, unspoken understanding, met his gaze. He offered a thin, wolfish grin, a silent acknowledgment of the shared misery. The grumbles of discontent from the other steerage passengers were a low thrum beneath the groan of the ship. Liam caught snippets, a snickering whisper about "them Irish," a muttered jab about black Irish luck. He felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the urge to lash out, but Finn's hand, calloused and strong, clamped onto his arm. It was a silent command, a shared defiance. "Let 'em," Finn rasped, his voice rough as the coarse wool of his threadbare coat. "They'll see. They'll all see." Nights were a symphony of discomfort. The perpetual rockin' that stole sleep, the non-emptiness in their bellies that twisted like a knot, the icy draft that seeped through every crack. Yet, in the pre-dawn chill, when the first hints of bruised purple stained the horizon, they would huddle together, sharing a stolen crust of hardtack, their breaths mingling in the frigid air. Liam would feel a warmth bloom in his chest, a defiant ember against the encroaching cold. This bond, forged in the relentless churn of the ocean, was their shield. It was worth more than any promise of gold, more than a king's ransom. It was the very breath they drew, the steady beat of their shared heart against the vast, indifferent sea. The ship, a weary beast, groaning under the endless heave of the sea, no longer felt like a cage. The familiar, nauseating sway softened, replaced by a rhythm that nudged at the soles of their feet, a promise rather than a threat. A tang, sharp as sea salt and fresh as a snapped sail, cut through the recycled breath of steerage, a welcome assault on nostrils accustomed to damp wool and desperation. A low hum, like a swarm of restless bees, buzzed through the packed quarters, a shared current of expectancy that began to chip away at the leaden blanket of their passage. John and Peter, pressed against the pitted glass of a grimy porthole, felt it too, a tremor in their bones, a forgotten thrum beneath their ribs, a spark igniting in the ash of weeks. Then the dawn cracked open with a sound, a primal shout, a sunburst of pure joy, ripped from the upper deck, yanking every slumped form upright. Land! Land, ho! The words, simple pebbles tossed into a placid sea, sent ripples of roars and a cacophony of joyous cries crashing through the ship's belly. John and Peter clambered up the narrow, creaking stairs, their boots slapping against the worn wood, their hearts a frantic drum against their ribs, a wild flutter of "Is it real?" and "We're here!" They shoved through a writhing mass of bodies, the air thick with the scent of salt and unwashed wool, their hands gripping the splintered railing. Then they saw it. The vibrant colors of the sunset painted the sky, casting a warm glow over the landscape. Shades of orange, pink, and purple melded together, creating a breathtaking sight. The sun's rays danced across the horizon, illuminating the world below. The tranquil scene was a feast for the eyes. As the darkness of night descended, the stars appeared, twinkling like diamonds in the inky sky. The moon, a luminous pearl, hung low, illuminating the path. The majestic beauty of the world at night was a sight to behold. The stillness and tranquility of the darkness was a sharp contrast to the hustle and bustle of the day. As the morning sun rose, the world was bathed in a golden light. The dew on the grass sparkled like 1,000 tiny diamonds. The vibrant green of the trees and the colorful flowers brought a sense of life and energy to the morning. The beauty of sight is truly a gift, allowing us to appreciate the world in all its splendor. A collective gasp swept through the passengers, followed by a renewed outpouring of emotion. Tears streamed down the faces, laughter mingled with sobs, and hands reached out, clutching at each other in shared relief and overwhelming joy. For John and Peter, it was the culmination of months of desperate planning, weeks of arduous, uncomfortable travel, and years of dreaming. The distant promise, the whispered tales, the idealized images they had held in their minds, they were all coalescing into a tangible reality. The air crackled with an energy they had never before experienced, a palpable sense of destiny unfolding, to be continued. If this is your first time joining in on this story, you may find it beneficial to go to An Irish Rebel Chapter 1, Parts 1 and 2. I truly hope you enjoy this latest edition. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share.